A couple announcements before we move on to our speaker tonight. Well, first of all, red-winged blackbirds are back. I think that's worth acknowledging. Yes, I have not had one personally, but I think, Susan, you had a flock. Anyone else seen red-winged blackbirds or heard them this week? Okay, couple people. And we had a female red-winged blackbird on our field trip last week, I think. So anyway, that gives us hope. A little update on the Ask Library. We did not get enough volunteers to help with that, so we will dissolve that library, and we'll be updating you about how you can have access to some of those books if you'd like to add them to your own personal library. It may be that we have some available at the next couple of meetings, but we'll keep you posted about that. We've got a beginning birding walk taking place on Saturday, March 7th. That's always the first Saturday of the month, 9 to 11 a.m. at the Fish Hatchery. So encourage people to come. Hope you can come. And we do bring binoculars to that. So if you know somebody who doesn't have binoculars and thinks that that's a barrier to entry, it's not. All right, and then we have a field trip coming up on Saturday, March 21st, 9 a.m. to noon on the Kalamazoo River Valley Trail. So anyone who wants to join in on that can meet at 9 a.m. along Commerce Lane, just north of Mazel. And there's information about that on the website, on the events calendar. Next month, our monthly meeting that's on Monday, March 23rd, is entitled Small Wetlands, Big Impacts, and that's about interdunal wetlands and birds. So it should be interesting, and I hope you all can make it to that. Are there any other announcements? I don't think anyone told me that they had one. Kent?
May the 30th, we are planning a trip that we're inviting Grand Rapids Audubon to come along. This will be Allegan State Game Area. So we're trying to arrange back and forth with them. They may invite us on a field trip earlier in May as well. That's to be determined. But the 30th, like to have as many people as we could to show up and greet the Grand Rapids folks too.
Yeah, when we surveyed members a while back, there was a suggestion from at least one person, maybe several, that we might try to do some cooperative field trips with other birding groups. So this is an attempt to kind of work through the list of suggestions that you all have. So hopefully you can join in on that. It's a ways off, but you can get that on your calendar. Okay, if that's it for announcements, we're going to move on to our speaker tonight, our very own Dr. Susan Schneider. Susan is a climate change activist whose work includes, but is very definitely not limited to, serving as senior scientist for the sustainability nonprofit Root Solutions, contributing to the efforts of the Union of Concerned Scientists through, as an example, a podcast appearance and a green psychology blog, working on the climate change working group at WMU, where she is on faculty, and writing an award-winning book titled The Science of Consequences. I could go on and on. I'll let Susan fill out that biography as needed here tonight, but please join me in welcoming Susan as she presents on birds and climate change.
Thank you very much, Donna and John. You got it on. Okay, good. Can everyone hear me okay? Anyone having problems? Uh-oh, a little feedback there. Let me move around a little bit. Let's see. Still good over here? Okay, good. Thank you so much. Okay. This is a talk about the effect of climate change on birds. Okay, yeah, now we're getting feedback again, right? Is that okay for you folks? Yeah, okay. Okay, maybe if I avoid over there. Is it better here? Okay, good. I like to move around though. So this is a talk about the effect of climate change on birds. I want to start out by acknowledging climate change has had a huge impact on many people around the world. I also want to point out my subtitle here though, an update on progress. This is a talk that's going to have some bad news, but it's also going to have some good news because we are, in fact, making progress addressing climate change. So I'm going to give you some cause for hope. We need that. I've been following climate change since the late 1980s. When Jim Hansen from NASA testified to Congress about it, it became a public issue. Before that, actually, when I was an engineer, I studied solar engineering at Illinois Tech in the 1970s. And more recently, since 2017, I have worked on climate change full-time in a variety of capacities, like Donna alluded to. So I've been pretty much staying on top of it, and have been working in the area. And again, there really is some cause for hope here. National Audubon has been aware of the issue for a long time too, and has included it in its magazine, including this special issue from 2019. Anyone who wants to take a look, I will keep this out there afterwards, although I do want to take this home again. I'm going to have some things here to give away too. This issue actually won a National Magazine Award along with the accompanying web page, and I am 21st Century. I have a QR code for you there if anyone wants to go to it. I will also be showing you some slides from that award-winning climate action web page later on in the presentation. Okay, we're going to start out with some of the effects on birds. There's a huge scientific literature on this, so this will just be a sample, especially focused on effects in the United States. And then a short section on the climate crisis. I've given lots and lots of climate talks over the years. I have other talks just focused on that. So this will just be a sampling of some of the most important points, I think. And then we'll end with hope. Solutions. People around the world are working on this. We are making progress. I've been involved personally with a number of community-level projects, for example, as well as some of the very important other initiatives that are making a difference. So that's going to help the birds as well as us. There's some very direct effects of climate change on birds, and this slide gives an overview. There is, of course, direct mortality. When I think about fires, boy, the awful Australian bushfires of a few years ago, many of you may remember that. The estimate was that 1 billion animals died in those, including, of course, many birds. And these other climate change influenced disasters also take a very direct toll. Even larger, though, are the effects on habitat when it just gets destroyed or so severely modified that the organisms that would normally be in that ecosystem can't make it anymore, or they, are not able to reproduce successfully, etc. Okay, timing. With migration and with nesting, it's very well documented, not just for birds, of course, either, but for other migratory species, that some birds are nesting and migrating substantially earlier than they used to in the spring because of climate change. But sometimes the prey items that they rely on to feed their nestlings, like insects, or it might be some kind of plant, like hummingbirds rely on certain flowers to offer nectar when they start nesting, right? And you can have a mismatch in timing because of climate change, where some species are moving up faster than others in order to compensate. So that creates problems. Prey abundance. How many here know about the insect crisis? Okay, good. There's two really good books on this for those of you who don't. Oliver Millman, The Insect Crisis, Dave Goulson, Silent Earth. Both of them came out about 3-4 years ago, I think, summarizing the science. Around the world, pretty much, there's many places where insect numbers are crashing. Climate change is not the only reason this is happening, but it's certainly a very significant one from the data I've seen anyway. And of course, a lot of birds rely on insects. Even seed eaters need insects to feed their nestlings often. And so, that's That's a kind of an indirect effect that's certainly important. And spread of disease for humans. Lyme disease is spreading because of climate change affecting humans. Dengue fever is in the United States now. It didn't used to be. That's because of climate change. And for birds, likewise, we're seeing this influencing them. Is this audio working? Okay, good, thanks. And I'm going to start out with my sampling of the research of climate change effects on birds with one close to home involving the spread of disease. Now that the Great Lakes are warmer, there's more likelihood of some of these diseases like botulism and avian influenza. And so that's affecting us very close to home here. Some of you may remember, this is a few years ago now, but not that long ago, when there was this kind of perfect storm in New Mexico of drought, heat wave, and fire. And birds were literally dropping out of the sky. And obviously, again, the science very clear, that was driven in large part by climate change. Okay, I'm going to present some studies now that rely on citizen science. This is some of the good news here. We need to track what's going on, otherwise how can we address it and know what species are the most affected? So a lot of the data that the science relies on comes from us. Citizen science is so critical here. How many in this room have ever done a Christmas bird count? Yay, okay, almost everyone. If you haven't, come sign up. You don't have to be an expert birder. You can still contribute. The Christmas bird count has been running since 1900, and not since then, but at some point fairly early on, it was codified into a standard science censusing technique where you have a 50-mile diameter circle divided up into groups, and you have rules for backtracking. You know, if you backtrack, then you can't count anything other than new species or higher numbers of what you saw originally. You keep track of party hours, how many people in your group, and how many miles by walking, how many miles by driving, etc. And it's a standardized approach. Those of you who've done it know what I'm talking about. And so this has been used for decades now, making the Christmas bird count database, which is freely available to all, a wonderful source for scientists, including scientists tracking what's happening with global warming. Likewise, eBird. How many have used eBird? Yeah, great. Okay, eBird is a little different. With the Christmas bird count, you have a compiler in charge. It's Russ, who is here somewhere, right? Russ, there in the back there. He is our compiler of our Kalamazoo Christmas bird count. John Brenneman does our other local counts, and they keep tabs and make sure everything is looking, like it's good scientific data, right? For eBird, there's reviewers too, but it's not like the reviewers know all the people who are submitting, right? So it's not quite the same level of scientific credibility, but most reviewers do try and do a good job. They ask for documentation, which sometimes is kind of annoying for those of us submitting eBird observations, right? Do you have a photo for that? Do you have a recording? Was there someone else there, right? So this is used for scientific purposes also. I'm going to show you an example for climate change. And then, has anyone done either of these? Breeding Bird Survey or North American Record? Yeah, okay, fewer. Wonderful, wonderful, yeah. I've never done a breeding bird survey, but that's a different kind of scientific censusing approach where you follow a standardized route and you have certain places where you stop each time, and then you count everything you see in here for, I think it's 5 minutes, is that right? I believe so, anyway. This has been running for quite a few years too. Do we have any BBS routes near us in Kalamazoo? We do, okay, good. Who runs them? Okay, Nature Center, good, okay.
Don't hold me to that, but yeah, there's a bunch of roads.
Good, good. I am so glad to hear that. So we have those data here too. Now, a lot of these other sources like eBird data, Christmas bird count data, freely available to all. They have great websites. I'm not sure that's the case for the breeding bird survey, but I haven't honestly checked. It might be. Okay, and then one that I do know about, North American Migration Count. I was actually a compiler for that when I lived in West Virginia. That was run like the Christmas bird counts, but instead of having a 15-mile diameter circle as the unit was a county. So a much bigger effort during a time of year like in May when there were a lot more birds. Having compiled that, I can tell you that was a heck of a lot of work, but you get a lot of data out of it. That was starting to be pretty fruitful, and then eBird came along, and I don't know if it's even done anymore, but for a while there, that also was something comparable to the Christmas bird count, but for migration. It was a really great book by Chan Robbins, I think. A great idea. Okay, so from Christmas bird count data, including those of us in this room, this is a recent study looking at 16 common duck species over the past 50 years and finding that, as you would expect, and as we've seen right here in Michigan, right? Now that winters are warmer. When I lived in Alabama, I worked there for several years. Birds used to come down, waterfowl used to come down from the far north and winter there over, December, January, right? That doesn't happen so much anymore now. Because if you're a duck, why would you fly down an additional 800 miles or something like that when there's perfectly good open lakes in Indiana, right? Even in Michigan, right, to some degree. And we've seen this with the Christmas bird count data, right? That birds are wintering further north because they can, and it saves them energy, So yeah, they're modifying their behavior. That very clearly attributed to climate change. And going along with that, this is a study based on eBird data. So this is year-round, and this is much more limited in scope because eBird is, right? It didn't start until 2007 when people were really making a lot of observations by then with eBird. So, but just in this 15-year period, we see the same kind of thing as with the Christmas bird count study, that waterfowl are wintering further north, and since this covers all year, you can see. Okay, there we go. The whole northern part of the country there, including Michigan, the blue indicates that there's more wood ducks now, according to eBird, at the end of that period than before. And it's pretty safe to assume, based on the study I just showed you from CBC data, right, that global warming is a significant contributor there. This also presumably why wood duck populations in the south have been declining, indicated by the red. Okay, let's go a little further afield now to the desert southwest. And here, 25 years of breeding bird survey data with those roots, those transects, right? And yeah, just very clear data, very very significant direct effects on a number of species. Yeah, and again, very clearly driven largely by climate change. One of the first animals that most people think of when they think of effects of climate change on, wildlife is polar bears, right? Up in the Arctic, most people know, I think, that the poles are warming faster than anywhere else on the planet. It's not just polar bears up there, though, right? It's birds, too. So what's happening to the polar specialists, like the snowy owl? And what about the high-altitude species, like the nutcracker and the rosy finches? In that case, those aren't polar birds, but they specialize in, like, the tops of the Rockies, like the tundra area up there or close to it. And these areas are warming, too. And so you can't go any further than the North Pole, and you can't go any further than the top of the mountain. Beyond that, as climate warms, these species are being squeezed out of their habitat. And I was able to find a very disheartening data item about snowy owls, which they're here in the winter. Why haven't we heard about this? Maybe some of you have. Look at this. 50%. Who knew? Did any of you know that? I didn't either. Yeah. So anyway, polar birds and high-altitude birds are in trouble. So are birds that breed in the boreal forest. The boreal forest in Canada and Siberia has been burning a lot lately because of climate change. That's having harmful impacts, of course, and as the world continues to warm, boreal forest is going to have to, accommodate. It will change in nature, it will shrink further north, etc. More on that in a bit. So yeah, all these species, including spruce grouse, which nests in northern Michigan, and palm warbler, bay-breasted warbler, which nest, I think, maybe in the UP and in the boreal forest further north. These are all going to be impacted. And again, the bay-breasted and the palm warbler we see here in migration, just a couple of months. I can't wait. Yeah. I'm from Chicago originally. Many visits when I was a kid to the Field Museum of Natural History. In this study, the Field Museum scientists looked at breeding data that they had from bird nesting records back a century before this study was published. And these are all recent studies, all in the last 10 years, right? And then they looked at current breeding times, when are birds nesting? And nearly all the bird species that they looked at are nesting earlier. And for about a third of them, as you see, it's shocking, just in 1 century, that it should be almost a month earlier. Almost a month. It's just really a very significant change, again, clearly due to global warming. In this study, this just being from 20 years, they looked at a huge number of species. This was one in the Nature family of journals, which is really top-notch. And just in that short amount of time, that's only 20 years, blue-winged warblers are expanding their range by nearly 100 miles, actually over 100 miles further north. And most birds were either going higher in altitude, like the rosy finch, as I mentioned before, or going further north, so that the temperature range would be more comparable to what they were used to. Now, it takes sometimes, again, longer for the ecosystems, including the prey items that the birds rely on, or the seeds, whatever, to also shift. This is, again, a big problem. But they are being resilient here. We are seeing adaptation in process. Blue-winged warbler, that's one we have here that actually nests here, I believe, right? Yeah. Okay, and then close to home again, a study looking at actual evolutionary physiological changes already. Because birds, nest every year. They can turn over in terms of the impacts for what gets selected. And when it's warmer out, having a higher surface area to mass ratio is beneficial because you're able to dissipate heat better. So we're seeing that for many bird species. And likewise, when you're migrating further, like the blue-winged warbler I just mentioned, right? It is more efficient if you have longer wings. And so birds that have longer wings are being selected for, and this is already clear in the database from scientists who were looking at that, yeah. So it's even affecting the physiological structure of birds, climate change, already. Here's one just to show you an example of what's happening outside of the US, because it's really quite different in the tropics, and this was a surprise to me again, and I've been following climate change for a long time, but in the tropics, the difference between winter and summer in temperature range is not very great. There's just fairly constant temperature year-round in a lot of these places like in Central America or Northern South America. And so this study, also a recent study, 2025, last year, looked over 70 years of data and found, unfortunately, that climate change is having a bigger impact there than it is here. Here, birds are declining. I'm going to talk about that shortly for a number of other reasons, like habitat loss. Climate change is one of them, but it's not one of the major ones, actually. In the tropics, it is. In the tropics, they're seeing a lot of birds, disappearing because they're not as well adapted to the kinds of temperature changes that are happening. At least that's the thought. And again, there's accordingly, there's other changes in the ecosystem. Presumably, their insects are probably affected too. That seems to be a worldwide phenomenon, yeah, so, yeah. Okay, this is not so much about climate change. This is actually going to be a somewhat hopeful slide, despite the fact that it's about a breakdown of what's happened with the loss of about 30% of birds in the United States. This study, which came out in 2019, right, made a huge splash. This made national news, I think even international news. Some of you will remember. Yeah, just, when we were young, there were a lot more birds. Really, we've lost nearly a third of our birds, which is really bad. But there's some good news to be found here too. Okay, here's the breakdown in habitat, and you can see that most habitats are losing birds, particularly at the bottom, grasslands. Remember that, I'm going to show you a grassland species shortly. Okay, but look at what happened with wetlands. Now this is compared to 1970. Can anyone think of reasons why wetlands birds are doing better now than in 1970? Yes? Yes, absolutely. This is something that happened in 1970s. We got the Decade of the Environment, Earth Day, the creation of the EPA, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and a lot of other environmental legislation. Yes, and so you're exactly right. Let's look then at the different families of birds. Not surprisingly, ducks and geese are doing better because wetlands are doing better, right? We're better in the US now at protecting them compared to 1970. We learned, we did the right thing. This is possible. And look at raptors. Look at raptors. Twice as many raptors now as in 1970. I was not aware of this.
Because DDT was banned.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, and as Gail pointed out, one of the main reasons why raptors are doing better now compared to 1970 is that it was 1972 when DDT was banned. In addition, can anyone think of another reason why raptors are doing better? The original Migratory Bird Treaty Act in the early part of the 20th century included songbirds. It did not include raptors. That was too politically, iffy. People still considered, a lot of people still considered raptors to be vermin, basically. They went after your chickens. This was bad. Let's shoot them all. So yeah, up until 1970, you could shoot raptors freely. There was no problem with that in most parts of the US. After 1970, we got raptors included in something like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, where you couldn't just shoot them freely anymore. So I think those two reasons probably the main ones. But again, humans saw there was a problem here, partly because of citizen scientists like us, entering the data, and we reacted, and raptors, in fact, responded. That's the case for many endangered species, too. So this is good news here. As to what's happening with vireos, I have no clue. And I checked the article, too. It didn't say anything why vireos are doing better now than in 1970, when most songbirds aren't. Go figure. Okay, National Audubon, as I said, has a great climate section of their website with many useful, informative web pages, and one of them is this, where for quite a number of species, you can look at what the model predictions are for different levels of climate change, global warming, right? 1.5 degrees centigrade, 2 degrees, and 3 degrees, as you see there. For different bird species, what the predicted changes to their range are. And for bobolinks, you can see that we're at like 1.3, 1.4 now, so we're close to 1.5. This is for 1.5 degrees centigrade warming. For bobolinks, they're pretty much expected to be mostly extirpated from our part of Michigan. That's what the red means, many fewer, unfortunately. The yellow means it's going to stay about the same. That's existing territory for bobolinks. And then the green means that there's an increase in their existing territory. And then at the top there, it's kind of a light blue, kind of a light gray, if you can see that. There we go, up there. That's a new habitat, which right now is boreal forest, but if it keeps on burning, maybe some of it will turn to grassland, and then bobolinks will have some habitat they can move to. Of course, the better solution is that we get climate change under control and don't have to deal with this, right? But yeah, really useful website for anyone to go on and explore what's going to happen to our birds if we keep on as we are. And this is the last slide in this section. I've been focused on birds, of course, but as many of you already know, I'm sure we are starting to be into the 6th great extinction again. We could still slow it down, folks, but it's already so bad for coral reefs. 90%, actually even over 90% of global warming, of the heat from global warming, has gone into the oceans, because it covers about 70% of the planet, and it's a fluid, so the way the physics works, it absorbs more of the heat than the land does. So it's just, we really need to get it under control. Okay, this from 2025, NOAA is no longer doing this kind of graph, but until recently they were. And so this is a snapshot of the month of October for the whole planet. And you could see the dark red is record heat compared to all previous historical records. The dark pink is much warmer than average, and that's almost everything. Almost everything is either record heat or much warmer than average. And this is what we've been seeing almost every year lately, yeah. This is one I do in all my outreach, and I've been doing outreach since 2017. Again, I've been working full-time on this since 2017. This is a graph based on ice core data of almost 1 million years of CO2 in the little bubbles in the ice, so CO2 in the atmosphere. And you can see that, in fact, there are natural cycles, right, up and down. Always less than 300 parts per million, though, you will note. Again, almost 1 million years. These natural cycles are mainly due to solar cycles. Now look at where we are now. Yeah, this is not natural. This is human caused. And there's a lot of other evidence for that, which I don't have time to show you, but this one graph, I think, really conveys it so well. I used to get people telling me, oh, it could be part of a natural cycle. I really don't get that anymore. And good news, 70 to 75% of people in this country get that climate change is real and we need to take action. It's really not controversial. I almost never run across climate deniers anymore in my outreach. So this is good news too. People get this. Okay, indicators are everywhere. I won't spend much time on this. You know, fewer glaciers, they're melting, higher sea level. Yeah, heat waves. This is from California a few years ago, one of those fires. I lived in Miami for 5 years. This is from the Miami area. I lived there 20 years ago. This is what they call sunny day flooding, when there's no storm anywhere near, but during the highest tide of each month, during the lunar cycle, because of sea level rise due to climate change, lower lying areas of the globe now get flooded. This is happening in Miami. Miami at least has the resources to cope with it. Bangladesh is low-lying too. It did not cause this problem. It has a teeny little carbon footprint, and people have lost their homes, their farms. Yeah, right. Terrible. Pretty much everything humans do has a carbon footprint. This is one of the reasons it's such a challenging problem. It's not like the ozone hole, where all we had to do was cut back on the chlorofluorocarbons, like in aerosol sprays, right? That was relatively easy. This is so many things that need to change. Although, again, there's hope here. In many cases, we're going to get better health as a result. In many cases, there's financial savings as a result. But yeah. This is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is, for decades now, the main body of hundreds of scientists worldwide tracking climate change and making recommendations about what we need to do. So this is a graph in the most recent detailed report from 2023 of global greenhouse gas emissions since the year 2000. It was looking like we were going to plateau out and then start going down last year, 2025. And then that didn't happen. I think one of the reasons from my reading is data centers, frankly. They use huge amounts of power, and yeah, data centers are screwing us up. But the good news here is that we are very close to hitting the peak, it looks like. Renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy almost everywhere on the planet. Solar in particular, sometimes wind, geothermal, etc. That is, if anything's going to save us, that's it. Yeah, because so many places are making huge progress, even places like Africa. They've got cheap solar panels from China now. So how do we get to the blue line? What we need to do is get on that blue line and hold this as close to 1.5 degrees centigrade as we can. And that corresponds to a really hefty cut compared to 2019 in just 4 years in 2030. Most experts think we are not going to succeed in making this, but we can get close. And just holding it to 1.6 degrees centigrade as opposed to letting it get to like 1.8, that corresponds to a huge savings in human lives, ecosystems, financial costs, et cetera. You know, so again, you know, the best we can do is to try and accomplish as much as we can. The proper comparison across nations has to take population into account, so it's the carbon footprint per person per year, so it's per capita. The US is not the worst in the world. Some of the Middle Eastern countries are with all that oil that they have. And good news here is that the US is down from being in the 20s, where some of the Middle Eastern countries still are. Metric tons CO2 equivalent per person per year. So we are going in the right direction, mainly because of renewable energy, right? Also, Canada and Australia are just as bad as the US. Yeah. Good news here. Take a look at the European Union. And Germany and France and England, the 3 largest countries in the European Union, are only slightly higher than that average. They're at about 8. So that's only about half of the US level. Japan, likewise, you can have democracy and capitalism and good jobs and good quality of life and still be meeting your obligation to cut greenhouse gas pollution. You can have it all. And in fact, some states in the US, not Michigan, but listen, Indiana is one of the 5 worst. We're better than Indiana. Yeah, we're right close to the national average. California and Massachusetts are at the UK and Germany level at about 8. So we're making progress right in the United States. It is really hopeful. Just quickly, there's so many good books about this. Again, I've been reading these books since the late 1980s, and I'm going to highlight 4 of them. And I have long maintained an annotated list of my 50 of my favorites over the previous 10 years, which I update every 2 months. Here is the February update. This is for someone to take. Meanwhile, I'll start passing it around so you can look at it. It's double-sided. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So just quickly, a few recommendations for. The one on the left is for anyone who thinks that getting to 2 degrees centigrade is not so bad. If you read that book, very data-based, you will quickly change your minds. And on the right, Greta Thunberg, of course, the young Swedish international climate hero. She didn't actually write the book, though. She and her team asked scientific leaders in all the different areas of climate change, including solutions, to write brief chapters summarizing their areas. So it's a very comprehensive, kind of dense book, but yeah, you learn a lot. There's good news there as well as bad news. And these 2 are both good news books. If you need a shot of optimism about climate change, both of these are great. The first one on my list there for quite a while, 2017, Drawdown, big bestseller, 80 current and 20 near-term methods of bringing down greenhouse gas emissions internationally. There's nice color pictures and human interest stories. In the appendices is all the data, and then online they've got a great website with more data. And there's the Drawdown Project, where people are implementing these solutions as we speak around the world. See? I told you I would give you hope. There really is hope. And on the right, I brought a copy of this book. This is the one that I hand out at my climate talks. Mary DeMacher is a genius. This is funny. You wouldn't think climate change could be funny? It can be. This is a fun read. It is inspiring. She totally gets the urgency. It's not just for parents, it's for everyone. It's got all these great examples, very thorough and comprehensive, but a really fun read. So someone please come take this free copy afterwards. Here, I'll put it over here. There we go. And please get it for everyone you know. It's in our local libraries. Highly recommend it. And while I'm doing that, Donna was kind enough to mention my own book, which does have a section on sustainability, even though it's focused more on learning principles and their range of applications. So here's a copy for someone to take. There we go. I think that's all the handouts. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, and does anyone get either of these? Okay, if you want to get a climate change e-newsletter, both of these give good news as well as bad news. Yale tends to focus more on the US, although they do some international coverage. World Resources Institute is a huge international nonprofit that is doing great work around the world, and highly recommended, very highly respected. They work with the UN all the time. So, and they don't bombard you. Yale used to be just every Friday. Given current situation, they have gone up to Tuesday and Friday now, but it's still just twice a week that you get their e-newsletter. And World Resources Institute, I think, is also about twice a week. Okay, solutions, yay! How did the European Union do so well? How did California and Massachusetts cut their greenhouse gas emissions so much compared to most of the rest of the country? Policy, that's how. So that's the biggest way that we can bring about the change that we need. And in my list, my annotated climate change books list, I have a number of policy books. This is just one I picked because this is one of the shorter ones. I think they do a good job outlining solutions and successes. So it's a hopeful book. Yeah, lots of good policy books out there, lots of good policy being implemented around the world and at the state and local level in the US, right, even right now. So this is big. Another big way that we are bringing down greenhouse gas emissions worldwide is a way that people in my field of behavioral psychology and many other related fields have actively brought to bear. Again, lots of people around the world doing this. Community level climate projects, where you're not working with individual by individual, but a whole organization, like a whole small city, or a whole business, or a whole hospital, etc. And so you can really have an impact that way. And there's so many success stories out there. So here's the Audubon climate award-winning climate action website. I'm going to show you a few examples there, which includes community level as well as policy work. And okay, more climate-friendly yard. How many people in this room have some native plants? Great. How many either mow with a human-powered mower or electric and don't use gas? Yay, see, that's great, that's great. So all of that is really having an impact, right? Very good. And being energy efficient, maybe getting solar panels if you've got enough sun in your area, being energy efficient saves you money. It's kind of a no-brainer. Consumers has programs, right? Very inexpensive. They'll send someone out, do a free energy audit. There's people in our area who will come and do that for you too. And it's kind of a win-win, and that really does make a difference, especially when you can get a whole neighborhood doing it. And then all of these, okay, how can we reduce food waste? Nearly a third of food in the United States gets wasted. And a lot of it goes to methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. This is just a lose-lose, right? The opposite of a win-win. So ways to reduce food waste, which is mainly in this country at the consumer level, that can really have an impact. And there's whole community ways, like having groups of restaurants, involved with apps and things. And yeah, I won't go into it, but this is what I've been doing since 2017, one of the things I've been doing. Okay, green infrastructure, right? Yeah, and National Audubon, again, has been taking this seriously for some time. They have top leadership who just focus on climate change, recommending how critical this is for everyone, including for birds. Okay, the kinds of things we need to do, I do all of these myself, and there's great community level projects out there, successes to follow for all of these. And this does not exhaust the list. I just picked out some of the higher impact things. And again, often there's extra benefits. Like with mowing and leaf blowing too, and snow blowing, you know. Boy, those engines are really inefficient. People who use those old, you know, gas leaf blowers, that's really bad for your health to breathe those fumes. There's a lot of pollution in there, so anyway. Okay, so what kinds of methods are used in these community level projects? The first one that most everyone thinks of is, let's provide some financial incentive, like you get a rebate for buying an EV or an e-bike or something like that, right, or solar panels, which is great, which really works, but you have to have the financial resources for that. And it turns out that there's plenty of other incentives that work really well too that are cheaper. And this is a great example. I'm going to just give you some brief examples here to close out this presentation and then take your questions. So this is from Vermont, right? Yes, Vermont. This is one of the main utilities in Vermont, which a couple years ago was having a problem because they're getting heat waves in Vermont now too because of climate change. And people were cranking up the air conditioning in the summer like they didn't used to, and the utility was having to go outside of their normal power supply sources to provide the electricity, and they were having to charge more. So people were unhappy all around, right? So they tried time of use pricing, which is a minor financial incentive. You paid more in the summer during the afternoon and early evening, so you would save money if you used fans instead, you know, blocked off the sun, didn't have the air conditioning on quite so much. And in most cases, time of use pricing really works to get people's electricity consumption modified in the direction intended. In this case, it failed. Vermonters wanted to be comfortable. So they kept the AC cranked up. And so the utility tried something else. It was so clever, very psychological. And this is Vermont, this is not New York City. So we're not talking millions of people here, we're talking like, you know, a few thousands, right? Okay. So they said, if as a group, all of you customers keep your peak level of demand below this level during the next heat wave, then we will donate $1,000 to this local animal shelter. So the charity has to be non-controversial, you have to do the publicity, and then you have to provide feedback so people can see, are we getting close to this limit, you know, for the next right? And people in Vermont thought this was so cool. So they talked about it, and this worked. And the next heat wave, the charity was a domestic violence shelter, and that worked too. It gives you hope for human nature, and it was a lot cheaper all around. Here's another fun example. Again, gamification. Let's make it fun to be sustainable. So this was designed for an office to help the employees be more motivated to save energy. Like, you know, with the temperature adjustment, turning off the computer and the lights, you know, at the end of the day, things like that, right? So happy chickens if you're saving energy, really unhappy chickens on the left if you are wasting energy. I mean, who would want to see that? And in addition, there was a whole game you could play where you could accumulate eggs if you saved energy. And the employees in this small business really got into this, and hey, you could play this game at work rather than working. And so they ended up saving, again, a significant amount of energy. So win-win. And not hard to do. This is not expensive to do for anyone who knows an organization that might want to adopt this. This is from my own field, behavioral psychology. We designed this back at the turn of the millennium, really more for kids' nutrition, get kids to eat their fruits and vegetables, which can be a challenge. So cartoon characters that had superpowers if they ate their veggies. And little, role modeling, role play things, and you get a sticker if you tried a new vegetable, and support and praise from the parents and the teachers. And you can see on the left, there's a lot of more research with this too, but this is a nice straightforward one. And in fact, Ireland used this, at least for a while, in all of their elementary schools. That's the level it's aimed at. This was being used in California, probably still is. So on the left, the experimental school, this was a 2-week period with the program before and after, and look at what happened with vegetable consumption at school lunches. I mean, almost tripling. This was really successful. And the control school that didn't get the Food Dudes program, it actually declined a bit. So why is this significant for climate change? Think about the weight of all the mammals on the planet, all the mammals. So I'm going to be showing you a pie chart. There's one wedge there for the proportion based on weight that's wild mammals. There's one for humans, because we're mammals, and there's 8 billion of us now. And then there's one for our livestock, because there's a lot of cattle, also sheep, goats, pigs, things like that, right? So think about what percentage out of all that mammal weight is wild. Anyone want to make a guess? Throw something out, be brave. 25, that's a good first guess, it's lower. 10, lower. I'll just show you. Yeah. I've used this for many years in my outreach too, 2017 again being the year that I started doing outreach for climate change. Yeah, this is one of 2 independent assessments that I've seen. Both of them come up with a figure of 5% based on weight for mammals. We have a biodiversity crisis, as people in Audubon are well aware of, as well as a climate crisis. The biggest issue here is cattle, especially beef cattle. Cattle are really inefficient, and they put out a lot of methane, dairy cattle too, for that matter. But beef in particular, it just has a humongous carbon footprint. I didn't take the time to include that slide, but one of the best individual actions you can take is to eat less beef. No one's saying anyone has to give up beef, but eating less is really helpful. Chicken is low carbon, obviously plant-based. Sustainable seafood mostly is low carbon. And we have things like Impossible and Beyond Burger. How many have tried one of those? Okay, for those of you who haven't, in blind taste tests, people cannot tell the difference between the Impossible Burger and the real hamburger. And I believe it. When I'm on the road doing climate talks, I can go to Burger King because they've got a Whopper with the Impossible Burger. I could feel good. Yeah, it's great. Okay, just 2 more examples now. And this one is for a large city, but it can be scaled down and has been. I include this one because it includes so many of the methods that can be used at the community level to help people move in a more sustainable direction. So that's the goal. They identified the barriers why people weren't carpooling more or taking public transit, et cetera. They timed it. This was a study with thousands of people in it. They timed it when a neighborhood had road repair. So people were already having to modify their existing habits of driving, so they were more amenable to trying one of these alternatives. So start small, just get people trying, like they have rapid transit there, get them trying rapid transit just once. Make it really easy, give them a free transit card for a month, have them sign pledges. Again, good news about human nature. When people sign a pledge that they are going to try riding the rapid transit or try creating a carpool, most people actually try to live up to that. I mean, there's nothing holding them to it. They just sign their name on something at some table somewhere. But, it's kind of nice. Studies have checked on that. Public meetings where people could serve as role models and the barriers could be addressed. And all of this, I mean, they did everything right. It was really an exemplary intervention. And so not surprising then that they got a huge drop. Imagine if Chicago rush hour or Detroit dropped by 20%. Yeah, And again, lots of side benefits, less pollution, as well as less climate change. And people actually did form new habits. You could do this for schools too, and in this case, this was very inexpensive. This was not something that required lots of financial resources. In fact, they saved a lot of money. The idea being here, you have teams of faculty, staff, and students working together to figure out where you can cut your energy use. And you have public recognition as one of the incentives. That's really inexpensive but very effective. And school rivalries, like for athletics, right? Only now it's for who can save the most energy. And look at how well this worked. I mean, here's the data. The first year, they didn't save that much. They were still learning how to make it work. But then it just climbs and climbs and climbs. And this is in the Tools of Change website, which I am affiliated with. This is freely available to all. This has several hundred examples, all data-based with all the information you need to replicate. And the same thing for Seattle, that's in there too, for all these different community level things. I serve on, pro bono, it's all free, right? I serve on the Landmark Designation Committee for Climate Change. I've done that for 3 or 4 years now. Yeah, this is a really great website that's really easy to use and has hyperlinks, to the things you need to know and people who will help you if you want to bring one of these projects to your own business or your own community. Okay, so here's the kinds of strategies. Not limited to these, of course, but these are some of the important ones, I think. And there's plenty of networks that share successes freely. Here in Michigan, in West Michigan, we have the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum. So anyone affiliated with that or know about it, there we go. Thank you, Gail. Yes, exactly. And Michigan State Townships, one of my friends used to be involved in their sustainable efforts, like for Kalamazoo Township, I think that was, right? So we're sharing information. Again, you often save money when you do a sustainability intervention as well as bring down pollution. And so it's a win-win kind of thing for schools, for healthcare, pretty much everything you can think of now. And this is a worldwide phenomenon too. This is not just the US, of course. So that's really hopeful too. Yeah. We can just take what's there and scale it up and apply it. Don't have to start from scratch. And right here in Michigan, we have the Michigan Climate Action Network. I went to the conference last year in Lansing. It was great. And locally, we have the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition. I was on the steering committee for a year. I got too busy with other things, so I'm not anymore. But they have a lot of great projects going on locally. And these are all nonpartisan. We have a very active, nonpartisan Citizens Climate Lobby chapter here, which is part of the Kalamazoo Crisis Coalition. And of course, this chapter is an affiliate of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, and therefore of Michigan Climate Action Network. This is really hopeful. Lots of people are working on this. We can address this successfully. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have just a couple minutes, I think. Does anyone have a question for Susan?
Oh, I should have given my email too. So anyone who wants to email me questions can do that, right? Maybe we could put that in the newsletter.
Your email address?
Email, yeah, if people have questions, right? Or I'm just susan.schneider@wmich.edu. That's my Western Michigan University email. Yeah, Susan.Schneider. That's the way they do it at the university, yeah. Yes, Anne?
I was shocked and floored by the mammal weight,
Yeah,
and that only, what, about 8%?
about 5%, only 5%.
Are wild?
Yeah,
But where are these statistics coming from? And
okay, sure.
by weight, you mean you're taking every animal as an aggregate Why do you do it by weight rather than by species or individual?
I would say to take a look at the article, right. I guess because, well, yeah, it's a good question, right. Why wouldn't they do it based on numbers, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It's been too long since I read the article, I'm afraid. But I'm sure there was some logic there, and it certainly does have an immediate impact this way, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, good question. Yeah, really, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Susan. We appreciate you. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for coming.